So look at the picture on your desk. Okay. If we look at this, we have temperatures. Okay. And what we need to find, we need to see what do these temperatures, where are the temperatures the hottest? So if we look at the top map, where is the temperature the highest? Which places? Top map, where is the temperature the highest? Not Lake Geneva. Midway, O'Hare, okay, Whiting. What about on the bottom graph? Where's the temperature the highest? Milwaukee, okay. So what can you say about both of those areas? Not that they're by the lake, because that's not the right answer. What can we say about these two areas? Why are they the hottest? Where are they? What are they? They're cities. Yes, lots of people and lots of pavement. So what do they have in common? They are both large city areas, right? So O'Hare is right in the heart of the city. Milwaukee is the city as well. So urban areas are typically warmer than the surrounding areas. You will find this if you look at temperatures on maps, like in the weather forecast. A lot of times you'll see the cities are warmer. Now, this gets a little confusing because we are by a lake. Water does crazy things. Okay, in the summer, if you go by the lake, if it's like 100 degrees, is it going to be warmer or cooler by the lake? Cooler, okay? Why? Because if we think about the temperature of the water, the temperature of the water is like 50, 60 degrees, whatever. So it's cooler than the air. So the water is cooling off the air around it, and that's why it's cooler by the lake. Now in the winter, though, if we go to by the lake, okay, the temperature of the water is going to be what, 30, 40 degrees. Typically, it's going to be warmer than the air. And so the lake actually heats up the air around the lake. And so in the winter, what you'll notice is that us by the lake, a lot of times we don't get quite as cold as the areas that are more inland. All right. So areas by the coast have coastal climates, and typically they're more mild. They don't have as big high temperatures or as low temperatures, okay? But for our sake today, we're talking about cities and we're talking about urbanization. So we're talking about how the temperatures in cities, for the most part, are hotter than the surrounding areas. Flip that sheet over. Here's a sketch of an urban heat island. This is the profile. So on the y-axis, we have the late afternoon temperatures. That's when it's the warmest. Okay, we have the rural area, suburban, commercial, downtown, urban, residential, park, suburban, rural farmland. So the highest temperature is where? Downtown. Okay, and we call this a heat island because it's basically its own little island that is hotter than the rest of the areas. So this is a heat island. So then take a second and look at that second diagram. Second diagram explains why urban areas are warmer than suburban areas. So why are urban areas warmer? Okay, they absorb more heat. They have a lot of surfaces that absorb more heat, right? So think about pavement. We talked about albedo, the percentage of sunlight that's reflected, okay? So a high albedo would be snow. Well, pavement has a really low albedo, and it absorbs most of the sunlight that hits it. So because there's a lot of pavement and a lot of buildings, a lot of structures, a lot of that heat's being absorbed rather than reflected, okay? We also have less evaporation and transpiration from plants. So with the water cycle, if you go into a forest, typically it's going to be cooler. Why? There's a lot of transpiration happening from plants. This is exactly why you guys sweat when you're hot. The sweat is going to evaporate, and that is supposed to cool you off. We know that a lot of times it doesn't, but it's the reason that your body produces sweat. So urban areas are typically warmer than surrounding areas because they absorb more heat and because there's less evaporation. All right, you can pass those sheets up to me, please. What I want you to do is get out your worksheet, the urbanization one from yesterday. So I'm gonna give you like 10 minutes to work on finishing this worksheet. Okay, I'm gonna do, most of you got the graph done. If you didn't, that's totally fine. If you flip to the back side, it says calculate the rate of urbanization, and it says it's equal to the slope. Okay, so if you remember slope from algebra, slope is, we can calculate it as y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1, or the change in y over the change in x, or rise over run, whatever way you were taught, okay, is fine with me. They're all the same thing. So from 1960 to 2017, and it says for the United States. So for the United States, they were at 70% in 1960 and at 82% in 2017. So what is my y? Well, my y-axis on my graph was the percentage. So what I'm going to do is take the percentage, so 82 minus 70, and then I got to take the x's, 2017 minus 1960, right? And you'll divide them, and you'll get the answer. Now, we don't multiply by 100 because it's not asking us for a percentage. Anytime it asks us for a rate, we're not going to multiply by 100, okay? We only multiply by 100 if it asks us for a percentage, okay? Yep, the growth rate, no. They want you can use a calculator for this. Yeah, use a calculator for this. So when you get past, when you get down to the second part, there's some graphs, and these graphs that you're going to have to look at in order to figure out the other answers. So I'm going to give you about 10 minutes to work on this. Flag me over if you have questions, and then we will be doing some notes after that. So before we write these definitions down, what I want to do is I want us just to look at this graph, okay? So this graph here, we see that suburban populations are increasing a ton. This is in the United States, by the way. So we have suburban population. Urban is still increasing. You guys saw that, okay? Rural, however, is declining. Rural is like what? Farms, out far away from the city, countryside, okay? What's urban? Cities, suburbs. What are the suburbs? They're just outside of the cities, okay? So most of the people in the U.S. are living in suburbs, okay? Why do you think most people live in suburbs? Okay, it's easy to commute. What else? Okay, so property values are lower. Good. If you remember, if you learned in history, right, basically everybody was farmers back in like the 1800s, okay? And then we get industrialization and the growth of cities, okay? Everybody and their brother wanted to move to the city. Why did they want to move to the city? Jobs, right? More opportunity. Instead of just being a farmer their whole life, they could maybe climb the ladder and get a better paying job, and there's lots of opportunity, okay? Well, over time, less people have now been in urban areas, and now we're moving to the suburbs, okay? Why don't you think they want to live in the cities anymore? Less space, they're crowded. What else? Expensive. Polluted, crime, right? How many of you want to go live in the south side of Chicago, right? Some parts of the cities are getting very run down, and we're going to talk about why that happens. Sure, we still have the nice downtown areas and whatever, but there are large parts of cities that end up getting run down. All right, so suburban areas, they surround cities, surround metropolitan centers. Okay, the suburbs are where most of the U.S. population lives. Now we're going to hear another term. Another term is called ex-urban area. Okay, this is like a suburb, okay, except it's outside of a suburb. Okay, so I'll draw you a little picture here. We have like the city, okay. Now around the city, we have all of these are all of my suburbs, right? Okay, so you know, maybe Greenfield is a suburb of Milwaukee, or Oak Creek, or Wauwatosa. Ex-urban are even further outside of that. They're outside of the suburbs. So people are actually moving from the suburbs to the ex-urban areas because the suburbs themselves are getting a little crowded. So this is the second layer that we add on here. So it's usually just outside of the suburbs. And it's not directly connected to the city because the suburbs are in between. So just outside of the suburbs then. Urban areas are located, okay? So where are we seeing these ex-urban areas growing? To a large extent. So this map that I'm going to show you is going to have red and blue. Okay, red means it's growing a little bit, or blue means it's growing a little bit, red means it's growing a lot. Okay, here are ex-urban areas. Notice Milwaukee, okay, people are moving from the suburbs even out a little bit further from Milwaukee. They still want to have access, but some of the suburbs even in Milwaukee are getting a little crowded. Madison, okay, you can see over here, California has a lot. Why? Because a lot of the cities in California are getting so crowded, and the suburban areas now are getting a little crowded, so now we're even shifting to ex-urban areas, okay? In the Northeast, there's a lot of cities over there, okay? Same kind of thing. So this is the difference between suburban and ex-urban. I want to show you a picture before I let you do this, write this down. I'm going to show you a picture of urban sprawl because I think you'll understand it when you see this picture. We're going to watch Los Angeles, and we're going to watch Los Angeles over the years to give you an idea of what urban sprawl looks like, if my computer can play along here. It's so slow today. Oh my gosh. Okay, maybe not. It's literally like frozen. Good job. Good job, computer. So, all right, while we're waiting for this, let's just write down the definition then. What the heck is urban sprawl? Urban sprawl is the spread of urban areas. They spread out, and they spread out into other suburban areas. What causes this? Well, we have the invention of automobiles or of cars. And because we have cars, we can move further out away from the city because we don't actually have to walk everywhere. And so the city areas can spread out a little bit more. Living costs, it's cheaper to live in the suburbs. So the urban area expands into the suburbs. okay? Or we make the suburbs, which are kind of part of the urban area. Government policies. So government puts policies on where people can live. So certain types of land people can live in for houses, certain types of land are only used for shopping, certain types of land are used for agriculture. So a lot of times what happens is the city runs out of land that can be used for people to live in. And then something called urban blight, which is a negative thing that we're going to talk about, and it's what happens to cities after a while. All right, so let me show you this animation now. We're going to watch, this is Los Angeles, okay? This is Los Angeles. This is so complicated. This is Los Angeles in 1877, okay? 1907, and they're just going to add different colors to show you the growth. 1937. Okay, here's Los Angeles in 1950. 1970. 1990. And finally 2000. So if you notice, Los Angeles here is spread out a ton. And you're like, well, yeah, Miss Frankston, it's growing. There's more people. Well, yeah, that's the point, okay? As cities grow, more people spread out around them, and the city becomes bigger, right? And it becomes this big urban sprawl, okay? And people have to use cars and fossil fuels a lot more to get from place to place, okay? So in some areas, we have what's called zoning, okay? Yeah, you don't have to write any of this down. All cities have this, okay? The city of Kenosha has a zoning map. And it's used to separate industry from residential neighborhoods, and it creates a quieter and safer communities. But it often promotes car traffic, automobile development, all of this stuff, because we have to use cars to get around. So here's what a map looks like. This green area is residential, okay? Yellow is public, okay? Pink is commercial, right? So like shopping areas. Purple is a subdivision here, okay? Industrial is orange, so that would be like a manufacturing plant. And so what the city does is it divides up the sections of land into what they can be used for. So if this land is used for commercial, you can't put a house on that. If this land says it's used for public and it's a park, you can't put a house on that. And so there's only certain areas that you can build in. And so because of these laws, cities have to expand because there's only certain places that they can do certain things in. So what the heck is urban blight then? Well, this is a problem, okay? It is a positive feedback loop. We talked about positive feedback loops being a snowball effect, right? So they get bigger and bigger and bigger. Okay, they keep feeding into itself. So what happens? People move away from the city because they want to live in the suburbs. It's cheaper, it's a little quieter, they want to have family. And as a result, the city ends up deteriorating. And because the city deteriorates, it causes more people to leave. And so once you get that definition written down, we're going to write, we're going to fill in those boxes. I'll tell you what to write. We're just going to be copying what's in these boxes, in those boxes, but I'll rewrite them since a lot of you in the back probably can't see very well because it's kind of small. So here's how the cycle works, okay? So we'll start over here on the right. The population shifts or moves to the suburbs. So some of the population moves to the suburbs because they want cheaper housing, they want a little bit quieter life, they want to raise a family, it's more economical. So they shift to the suburbs, okay? Now, taxes decline. And what do I mean by taxes decline? I mean, the city is not getting as much money from taxes as they used to. Why? Well, there's less people. People have to pay taxes. If you have more people, you're going to have more money from taxes. So we get less money from taxes. okay? And so because we don't have as much money from taxes, they have to make budget cuts. So this says services cut. So they cut out some of the services. Maybe the public library is only open a couple days of the week. Maybe, you know, instead of 10 snowplows, they only have 5 running because they've got to cut some budgets. You know, maybe they pay somebody to go pick up the trash from the neighborhood parks only once a week instead of twice a week. So they cut some of the services. Maybe they only have 3 public buses running instead of 10. And then because they cut services, okay, there's fewer people, fewer customers, and some of the businesses leave. So more people end up leaving because there's less stuff to offer them. And then because businesses are leaving, the neighborhood declines. So now we've got empty, vacant lots. We've got rundown areas. We have empty properties, and crime might go up. So as a result, because it doesn't look pretty anymore, more people leave, and it just keeps continuing. The cycle keeps continuing and continuing. Now, I want to show you an example. Philadelphia is an example of this. So Philadelphia is an area that's gone through some urban blight. And what I want to do is I want to show you what they're trying to do in order to fix this urban blight problem that they have. So this is just 4 minutes. We get to watch an ad first. All right.
This garden starting up is wonderful. It's wonderful. It's making great use of space that was just sitting, having nothing being done with it. Now it's useful space. You got food, you're feeding families, you're creating relationships and friendships, community togetherness. You know, it's like this garden is doing more than just one thing.
Anything will just come into a vacant space. And in neighborhoods, a lot of times you do see trash accumulating, former drug paraphernalia accumulating. You see people doing all types of things they shouldn't do. And so it's incumbent upon us to come in and to try to do something with vacant spaces before we can just allow any old thing to come in and take advantage of that space.
In Philadelphia, there are over 40,000 vacant parcels in our city. And when these parcels aren't cared for, they really become problems for the community. When you're able to turn a vacant lot into a beautiful space, whether it's cleaning and greening it or turning it into a garden, it's really powerful in helping community members get to know each other.
Because this is all we have of the Brussels right now, but put 2 in each hole. When they first opened it up, we didn't think too much of it. Like, oh, well, we're going to see what this is going to be like. Once they got that and planted it and got to see it growing, it was like, oh, I can't wait to garden. It's more than just food and veggies and stuff like that. Like I said, it's bringing the community together where we all have something in common. And it's hard to have that in a neighborhood where it's not a whole lot good going on. You know, when you see it in the news, there's normally bad things going on. This is one good thing. All right, as long as you got that front one, I think you're good.
Yeah. Thank you.
All right, what we got going on?
We are building a garden that's going to be a home for members of this community. What happens whenever there's a community that has suffered from issues of economic depression, issues of systemic oppression in any form, that you have people who have been in a place who have been denied access to certain opportunities and certain things that you and I may take for granted, like having access to healthy food. And so this garden is an opportunity for people from all different types of backgrounds in the community to come together, to put their hands into it together. And so it really represents life, you know, in a community that may not have always been known for life.
All right, sweets, do me a favor. Can you take all these little clippings that I've made, put them in this green bag for trash, please? As a matter of fact, I can take this over to the garden, and that can be compost. Just put that in there. It branches out from the community garden to people's homes. You can walk up and down the street. You're going to see people growing things on their sides and their fronts because it just feels good. You can put some Brussels on. That's one thing that will keep me here a little longer because, you know, before it's like, oh, so much bad stuff going on and stuff. And I keep my kids in the house, and I don't have to do that anymore with the garden. That's somewhere I can take them and they can do whatever they got to do.
When we come together, man, the possibilities are really endless, and we can fill a vacant space with something beautiful.
So that kind of gives you an idea of what one area is doing, right? In order to prevent this urban blight or to kind of fix it, they're making a community garden. And then that allows the community to buy in and have a safer space and be part of something and kind of make people want to stay a little bit longer. One of the last things we're going to talk about here is what can we do instead. When we're designing cities, urban sprawl is a problem because then we've got a lot of people driving and depending on fossil fuels. Okay, so I wrote down some solutions. Some of these are more self-explanatory than others, but we can make sure that we have mixed land use. So we're not just using something for residential or for housing, but we can use it for housing and for commercial areas. You guys have seen like those places that have like a subway and then above it they have apartments, okay? So mixed land use. Have a range of housing options, have neighborhoods be able to be walkable, have people in the decision-making process. Make buildings compact so we don't have to spread out as much, okay? Make sure you have a strong sense of place in the community. Preserve open space, have a lot of transportation choices, build in existing areas rather than building new areas elsewhere, okay? So these are just some suggestions to make cities a little bit more compact and a little bit smarter. The last thing I want to talk to you about is food deserts. So one of the problems with cities and urbanization is sometimes we get a lack of access to food. And I'm going to put up a map here. This is Clifton Park. This is a map. And I'm going to pass out, I don't know if I have enough for everybody, but I'm going to pass out some of them. Otherwise, you can just look up front. So this is Clifton Park. Okay, so what I want you to do, take a look at this. The orange squares, okay, those are small grocery stores or corner stores, okay, smaller stores. The red ones, those are convenience stores, so things like gas stations, okay, 7-Eleven, okay, and then we have the yellow circles, which are supermarkets, okay, so those are things like your Piggly Wiggly, your Pick and Save, your Walmart. So if we look at this, where do you think most of the people get their food from? Here, I'll put the key on here. What are the most numerous on here? Yeah, the small groceries or the corner stores, okay? So what happens if you have a car? How does that change where you get your food? Yeah, you can go to the supermarket, you can go anywhere, right? But if I don't have a car, I'm limited to whatever's in my area. Maybe that's a convenience store, maybe it's a grocery store, okay? If we look at this map, okay, same kind of thing, right? We've got a lot of these corner stores, okay? But if you've got a car, you can drive wherever you want. If you don't have a car, you're stuck getting things from wherever you would need them. let's look at this map. This map, we don't see a lot of those corner stores. Instead, we just see convenience stores, and we see some supermarkets, right? So if you don't have a car, you either have to walk quite a ways, or you have to make sure that you live next to an area where there's a lot of available foods. This is part of Baltimore, okay? Now, if you look at, this is the medium household income. This is $100,000. That's a lot of money, right? So the people here are very wealthy. So they can drive lots of different places, okay? Up here, the median household income is $25,000. So what we're looking at here is what is the income, right? Is this a low income or high income area? Because we want to know, are people going to be able to drive to get their food or not? Okay? So when we talk about food deserts are areas where people do not have access to healthy and nutritious foods. What I want you to do, I want you to think about the closest grocery store to your house. Okay? Or now I want you to think about if you had to walk to the grocery store, how many grocery stores could you walk to? I could walk to 2. Okay? Most of you could probably walk to 1 within 10 or 15 minutes. Okay, it depends on where you live, obviously. Think about all of the other stores you could get food at. Convenience stores. How many gas stations? How many Walgreens? How many can you count that you would be able to walk to? Okay, so that's what we're talking about when we talk about food deserts. Okay, in Kenosha, we're pretty fortunate. However, we're going to look at a map. I want to show you where food deserts are located. Okay, where do you think the closest one is to us? Any guesses? Where's the closest food desert? The place where people don't have access to food? Racine or Milwaukee? Let's find out. Hey, guess what? Parts of Kenosha are considered a food desert. Why? Because people do not make enough money to be able to get to healthy and nutritious food. Okay? Now, it doesn't mean everybody, but it means there are parts of our population that do not have access to nutritious food. I see some of those individuals here. The individuals that come in with 3 honey buns because that's what they have. Okay? Not because that's what they want to eat, but because that's what they have. They haven't had fresh fruit at their houses because fresh fruit's more expensive. Okay? So if we look at this and we zoom out to Wisconsin, where do you notice there's a lot? Up north. Why? Yeah, so there's a lot, the population is a lot more spread out, right? Less people, and so they don't have as many grocery stores. If you have a cabin up north, you probably have to drive quite a bit to get to that grocery store, okay? So it's more spread out. If we zoom out to the US, where do we see a lot? Out in the West. Why? Because it's very sparsely populated, right? So there aren't a lot of cities, and so a lot of times you're going to have to drive a long way in order to get to that supermarket or that grocery store. You look at Alaska. I had a friend who lived in Alaska. Guess what? She would tell me stories about how they would get, like once a year, they would get iceberg lettuce, but it would be so wilted because it had been like frozen and nasty that nobody wanted to eat it. Okay? So do you have access to nutritious quality foods? Okay, that's the question. All right. So with food deserts, that's kind of what I wanted to wrap up. Our next unit is all on agriculture. So we are going to start with food deserts tomorrow and talk more about that, and we'll go from there. You have about 7 minutes left. You can get out your multiple choice that's due on Friday.